All right. So, yeah, this is the patch that I made for SimCell. And I'll say right off the top that a lot of these are reused components. So I plundered RJDJ library. And same thing with Martin Brinkman. There's a ton of his patches in here. The tricky part was to take the extended PD stuff and then distill it down to vanilla. So that was the first chunk of it. So as far as the signal flow, the top part here is that's the score. So what it does is that I like to think of music from, you've got the overall arc of the piece, and then you've got smaller arcs within that. And then it comes down to timbral stuff eventually. So here's sort of the macro level at the top, and every time it hits a bang, then it'll change the mix. So that guy just popped in there, right? And it can do other things too, but, you can hear that line just came in there, right? So this is sort of a way of triggering multiple parameters just on the timeline. And then the next one here, this one's actually going through patch changes on the granulation. So that is sort of following my idea of where I set the parameters to where I like it, where it feels good, and then I'm just modulating between those two. In this case, granulation, it's okay if you jump because you've still got the existing grains from the previous set of parameters, right? So yeah, it's a little distorted. Well, yeah, it's actually just the speakers are blowing. Yeah, it's okay, but there's that distortion is not me. I'll turn it maybe down. Sorry? This guy? Oh yeah, it's through HDMI, so it doesn't have the volume control. Yeah, it's great for that. Yeah, it's kind of like if I could just squeeze it, submit. Be quiet. Yeah. So here, I'll do it by software. How's that? I'll use my mixer, and I'll do a live mix. So these are the mains. All right. Okay. So there we go. Make it a little bit quieter so I get less distortion. All right. So we're sort of in the middle chunk here. And then as far as the instrumentation, I've got an instrument here that's it's basically just sine tones. It's very simple. Instrument 2 is FM. 3 is more sine tones without the phaser. Then instrument 4, it's the same exact guy without the phaser again. So lots of sine tones. So that's one level. And then if I see if I can figure out. So if I mute these guys out, all right, that's then it'll just be the granular layer. Eventually, if I get rid of that one too. All right. So this is the granular wash that's happening underneath. So this is a motorcycle that drove by, and so I kind of like a bit of I don't know, the stochastic process. So I'll just take a sample and throw it in there, and I don't really care so much what it is, and then I try to make it sound sort of emotive or interesting. With this patch, I made the comb filters, which is a little bit tricky in PD because you gotta really make a high resolution on your buffer size, because with the yeah, okay, good. So anyways, yes, that's how that works. And so with granulation, these are primarily like noise-based things, and to make them sound more musical, I run them through comb filters, right? So tune delay lines. And the delay lines, the comb filter 0 and 1 there, are tuned to notes which are sequenced in parallel to the notes on top. So that means that I have a harmonic relationship between the lead material and the granulated material. And so that's one sound being granulated there. But what I can do here is that with my different scenes, this not only changes the note data, and then also the pitch pitches for the comb filtering, but then it also changes the sample for the granulation. And I believe this granulator, uses like 8 voices or so. And the original had a whole bunch of discontinuities at the start and ends of grains. So when you granulate stuff, you're cutting it up, but there was a whole bunch of pops and clicks because the waveform would just end. So then what I did is used, it's like a half cosine, you know, where it's sort of like ease in fast, ease out kind of feel. And so I used that for enveloping all the grains just to get it to sound smoother. And the other thing that I did, which is really easy, is so then this brings in a second sample. So that's a violin that's being granulated. Okay. But the previous half of the previous grains are still there. So this is what I like to call granular crossfade. So half of the grains are being used for the current sample and half are from the old one. So that allows me to do sort of like timbral kind of crossfades. So if I click the next one here, it'll go from the violin sound, and then it'll go to a sample which is of an oscillator. It's a West African instrument. It's kind of got these gourds with sort of like beads inside of it, and they're connected by a string. And I had a friend of mine at the time play it, and it's a neat sound to granulate because it's got the shaker, but then also the impact when the gourds hit each other. So that's I believe that's this one here. Oh yeah, see, it says oscillator down there. Well, I can read it. So then it'll bring that in. Listen, it has to hit the point. So you hear a little bit of the tail there, and then we'll probably hit the start of it pretty soon. Right? So it allows me to sort of move slowly between different sort of timbral kind of feels in the background that are related to the pitched material. What else about that? And of course I'm using a lot of reverb. I'm using tempo-based delay. And one of the things that let's see here. And you can hear that ying, right? That's when the delay line gets shifted there. And this will fade out the violin, right? But leave the oscillator and then move on to the a synthesizer, I believe. Yeah, so this is the synthesizer here. It's kind of... oh, now, see, because I hit one of those bangs, it brought in my other levels there again, other layers. So, okay, good old ambient music. And if I wanted to, what I do for fast forward is I go to BPM 0, and then I can just go like, right, and skip through there. So you can see the lead pointer there zooming around on the top, and this other guy streaming around here. All right, so I'll hit the middle part there when I've got sort of full mix. And you can hear that, so what I did with the delay is that I did a variable delay line, because if you just have your long delay based on the tempo, and then you change it right away, you're going to get a discontinuity with the material that's already in the delay line, right? So what I did is it's not that difficult in PD, but I just, I wanted to base, it's like a tape-based, like a... Roland Space Echo. So it's like you basically shrink the delay line dynamically, and then from there, that's where you use that as a loop. Okay? So that's why it changes pitch as it's changing the length of the delay line with the material that's already in there, and then it reaches it, so it does the ease in, ease out to get to that point. Otherwise, you'll get these pops happening there, but I wanted it to sound musical, right? I didn't do that to the reverb because, reverb is all based with delay, but it was fine because, the reverb hits that thing and then it just continues to feed back on itself, and it wasn't as much of an issue for the reverb, but it was for the delay. Sorry, it's slightly distorted. Yes. That's the thing. It's like it's playing like. Okay, here. All right, I'll get rid of. Oh man, that's rough. Okay. Here, I'll go back to where the sort of next. So this is where I've got more sounds playing. And I clicked it twice, so it's going to be all the motorcycle sort of stuff. So say in the game, to shift between sort of this where you're kind of cruising around to like a combat sequence, the idea was sort of like where you would go to where there's like the scary reverb stuff. I muted the, sorry, put that guy back in there. Okay. So the idea is to sort of get to a scary sequence, and then we can go back to where there's kind of like everything's all good, all that sort of things space out, and then we go back to where we're sort of trucking around in a little guy again, right? It's so distorted. It hurts my ears. So it's okay. I'm glad that there's sound. Right? And so just to give you an idea of how much reverb is actually in there, I'll take out the effects. Okay, I think that's, let's see. Yeah, I still got the, okay. There's that. Oh, okay, here. Yeah, so there it is without reverb effects. Yeah. Right, and so you hear that self-similarity, and I got that kind of for free, because what I did is I just, it's actually, does anybody know the band Primus? Yeah, they're like, you know, sort of avant-garde-ish, jazzy, funky, sort of bass playing stuff. So the guitarist, he's quite an accomplished guitarist, but he's just like, oh yeah, to make things sound like their music, I just repeat it so that it sounds like it's intentional. So I use that idea with this, where the pitch classes are, you know, they're determined by where my X's are here, and then the way that they're being chosen is that I'm just shuffling, and then you've got like those different steps for like 16 steps. So I can choose the same one, and then what I do is that I just repeat that 4 times. So I have like my cards there, like the sequence of 16, and then I play it again, play it again, play it again, then reshuffle, right? And then I start over with another sequence. But it ends up sounding, to me, musical enough. But so I didn't do anything tricky with, I don't know, hidden Markov models or even weighting towards certain notes. It's random, right?
And are you kind of authoring various sets of things?
Yeah, yes, yeah, and the idea is that this would get driven by the game, right? So just letting it run is not really the best way to show it. So my idea with the macro gestures is to change the scene. So the idea was that the scene changes and then the pitch classes change, like where the notes are, and then I would change the granulation underneath. Maybe, you know, even change the BPM. Like I can even, it's easy enough to, you know, hardcore swing, right? I probably wouldn't do that with the game, but you know, it's easy enough to support that. But like even just like slowing things down, super easy, right? And that's part of I think BPM is a huge thing that would be great to have more of in games, where the sample-based stuff, even when you're working in like in Ableton Live, the granulation has a certain feel to it, right? So to be able to generate stuff, you know, even just with like MIDI with Ys and changing the BPM, I think is powerful. Because like I believe a lot of, you know, music sort of, you know, like a lot of the way that music works for me is simply the heart rate, like we were talking about earlier. But I mean, and the breath. You know, we have a normal way of breathing. So if you want to have something sound more melodic, then it's good to put a break in there. Otherwise, if you play all the way through, then it's kind of like we just naturally go like, oh, that person's not taking a breath. It sounds unnatural. So how could that be something that could be sung or like lyrical like that? yeah, are there any questions on what I'm doing here? Should I show you any of the guts? I mean, it's all, it's all nerdy stuff.
Are you kind of staying in particular keys and modes and things like that?
Yeah, I am. Okay. Yeah. But you can hear how it, like with working to, like say a minor mode, that shifting between major and minor, it kind of produces extra stress to me, where there's that weird, when the pitches are over top of each other, then you've got kind of this weird combination of the two. So I don't have any like transitions, but I feel like a lot of the transitions simply come out of the process, because there's already notes that are working from the previous thing, and then the granulation is sort of like, I like to have inertia, because if things just change like that, to me, I'm like, that's unnatural. It sounds odd. So I like to produce systems that have a certain amount of inertia to them, where they allow things to ring out. Like, I mean, you get that for free with reverb, right, and with delay. But I think that that's important. But it also produces a bit of a feel that things won't necessarily change instantaneously too. Because we listen to that and we're like, oh yeah, it's kind of safe. If I wanted to do a little bit more programming, I could probably change it so that I could have those hardcore hits where it's just like, bam, all the parameters change, get rid of the previous stuff, and really, give a, like, I don't know, if you needed like those moments in games where it's just like, I'm being attacked by a virus or whatever it is, like in this game, that you want to really hit those hard. But I felt like it was doing well enough with just the scene changes with the existing system.
And were you doing sound on this game as well?
Yeah, I did all the sound design too. That's a separate patch that I'll show next. Yeah.
But did those kind of have any relation to each other, the patches, or at least when you?
No, they didn't. And part of the way that I dealt with that is that you'll see that a lot of my sound design, I worked with a lot of bent notes, and so I do that on purpose in sound design so that I don't try and match them harmonically. That was to do with this game, because it's sort of like working in a graphic sense. I wanted to sort of have my music bed, but then I wanted the sound designs to be a separate cognitive space with the user interface design, because it was really easy to make things blur, and I didn't want to do that. What I wanted to do is say, like, if I wanted to have something that was going to change the feel of the music in the game, I would just change the music rather than try and do it through sound effects or tuning the sound effects to the music.
I was
for this
thinking more
particular
like if you would mix them together in one system, so you could, sort of lower stuff and duck stuff and things like that. But
yeah,
it's interesting to do them completely separately as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that would have, and it still is a definite possibility. So, yeah, I've done that, say with, which game did I do? I mean, I did it way back on this game called Death Junior 2, where it was really annoying because I was doing sound design, and then the composer, there was no correspondence between the two of us, so we were working and stuff, and it wasn't even like, we were not in tune with each other, and it sounded awful. So I basically had to change my sound design because, whatever, he had already done his stuff, and he was less involved in the process, so I actually made my sound design fit the music and sort of dance towards his stuff, rather than to have a correspondence, like a conversation between the two, which, yeah, that'd definitely be possible.
When you eventually did change this to samples instead, how different did it sound?
The music...
Did you still keep it kind of abstract like this? Or was
Yes.
it completely different?
No, I just rendered it out for the music.
Oh,
to be
you
honest.
rendered from...
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so that was... The music, in a sense, was easy-ish, but then the thing that became difficult was the transition between the music for the, the ambient state and then the combat state with samples, because then there's just a jump. The ambient state doesn't ring out, like, we're just using samples, and we weren't using, say, the reverb on Unity to get that. So yeah, that was a problem then. Yeah.
Did you have like CPU constraints in mind when you were building this? As you were going, were you sort of profiling CPU usage, or did you just kind of build something and then end up having to scale it back?
Yeah, I had to with the music. I guess I always knew that I had it. Like I was the way that I was thinking of it is like, okay, I want the sound design definitely to be, whatever, like live kind of sounding. But the music, okay, fine, I'll flatten that out. That would be easy because it was easy. I just rendered it into wave files. So I guess that fallback position always meant that I wasn't too concerned. But then I did when I was trying to get it to work on Android, then I was basically just tearing stuff out of here all the time. Mm-hmm. So I got rid of filtering. Is that true? Yes. Yeah, I don't have any filters in there besides the comb filters, which they're just delay lines. They're not filter like EQ kind of filters, which is something that was in a previous version of this patch. So I did remove that. To get the rate down, and then I also tried to find like a really cheap reverb too. So I tuned that to the CPU, to what we had available. The delay stuff was easy enough. Just sort of optimizing to be smarter about. Primarily not having filters, I guess. So I tried to have delay, very cheap reverb, and. And then just simple synthesis, like it's all pretty much, there's not a lot of FM even, it's basically just sine tones. Yeah. So I did do that, and it's been so long since I remember when my first version was, and I was like, I really did want to use filtering, because I thought...
I was going to say, did you end up putting stuff back in when you found that you'd have to render the music out?
Well, no, because then I had my aesthetic, like I had my piece sounding the way that I liked it, so I was just like, if I add filtering, then it's going to change the nature of the space of the piece. So I guess I got a lot of that kind of feel through the granulation layer. I felt that added a lot of dynamic element to it, so I didn't add the filters back in again. Because then I was going to have tuned filters to do stuff, but then that's sort of what the comb filters ended up sort of being. Okay, cool. So that's what that guy sounds like. Let's see. I think it's fun to produce systems where you don't quite know what's going to happen, but it kind of hobbles along. It keeps working. Like, okay, cool. That's fun. I don't know. Anyways, I'm gonna fade that puppy out. So, there we go. Swing.